Greetings, and welcome to another edition of Dharma Dirt at the Old Dog Zendo at Iron Mountain. Robert Browning wrote, "A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" A few weeks ago on a Friday afternoon, I idly turned on the news just to see what was happening. By coincidence, I came across the live feed from NASA of the landing of the Artemis II space capsule. It's called Orion. It was in free fall, plunging through the 50,000-foot level. Then a pair of drogue chutes deployed and slowed it down some. And after a short while, the three main chutes opened, and the capsule slowly drifted down to splash into the Pacific Ocean, right in the designated target area. Then, of course, the whole recovery routine was set into motion. And after almost 2 hours, the 4 astronauts stepped from helicopters onto the deck of the recovery ship to the applause and cheers of the ship's crew, as well as from Mission Control in Houston. The whole thing was absolutely amazing. And I found it inspiring that human beings working together could send people into deep space and bring them back. And of course, there was talk of building a moon base as a stepping stone to reaching Mars. Now, is this like the pioneers in their Conestoga wagons heading west to settle a new land? Well, maybe. But I think it's more like Columbus setting sail across the Atlantic, or maybe Ferdinand Magellan setting out to circumnavigate the earth. Both were shots in the dark, heading toward the utterly unknown. These great adventures are, in a way, leaps of faith. But there are those who take a very negative view of space exploration, moon colonies, and expeditions to Mars, and so on. They say water pipes are rotting, bridges are crumbling, education is in ruins, and the American healthcare industry is a disaster that bankrupts families. Rather than spend all that money on a techno-engineering extravaganza, why didn't we use it for improvements in education, new hospitals, more help for the needy, and on and on? Typical of this attitude is a quote from the comedian Bill Maher. He said, "I'm not a fan of going to the moon. Same question I've been asking as a kid. Why? Why is it worth the money? What are we doing there? It's just another big fucking rock. We could spend a lot, the money more wisely, I think." Let me tell you a true story about a young woman of my acquaintance. Okay, so at my age, I see everyone as young. I'd known her almost since birth. She was a very bright person, a talented photographer. But she never pursued any career that might have led to some sort of success. Why? Well, she was absolutely convinced that any money she might accumulate or save up would have been taken from others. So she just persisted in low-level jobs, mostly waiting tables at all-night restaurants. She loved the night shifts. As she got older, her health began to decline. There were back problems from her work, and she needed medical care that she couldn't afford. So one day, in despair, she took her own life. She, much like Bill Maher, was caught in the myth of the zero-sum universe. The notion that possession of anything is ipso facto depriving others. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon coined the saying, "Property is theft." Balzac claimed that behind every great fortune there is a great crime. Well, these are cute phrases designed to inflame anger and envy, but they have no real meaning. The zero-sum universe is characteristic of left-wing politics. It is the basis for the drive toward redistribution of wealth, as if wealth were a fixed sum, taxing the rich into oblivion because they have more than their fair share of that fixed sum. Socialism, communism, and all their related isms are based on the zero-sum idea. When you refuse to take responsibility for your situation, whether it be financial, emotional, or whatever, it's very easy to blame someone that you see as more successful. Somehow, that person's success has robbed you of something that you think you're entitled to. I'm old enough to remember the Club of Rome. This was, and I guess it still is, a group of so-called financial experts, business leaders, and politicians who predicted the total exhaustion of all the Earth's resources in just a few years. Their 1972 report, The Limits to Growth, was a Malthusian view that population growth would far outstrip the available minerals, energy sources, and food supplies in the next 10 to 20 years. And then there was Paul Ehrlich, who wrote the notorious Population Bomb that predicted much the same thing: famine, plague, mass starvation, and so on. None of those predictions were even remotely accurate. In Buddhism, all is mind. There is nothing outside this mind. And this Buddha mind is without limits. It is timeless and spaceless. And it is the mind of each of us. But how we live that mind is up to us. We can hunker down in zero-sum lives, obsess over how limited resources are parceled out, how our limited lives are parceled out, or we might look to the great visionaries. That would include people like Leonardo da Vinci and the founders of this country and the great religious figures, Jesus, the Buddha. So many Christian saints and bodhisattvas, all of whom worked to liberate us and show us the timeless, spaceless mind with a capital M. This is the mind that exists before all the karmic limitations and assumptions arise. It is the mind of no limits and no dimensions. In our Zazen, we take a backward step and discern this mind directly. That's what the biblical story of the loaves and fishes is about. The zero-sum mind saw only the few fish and a dozen loaves to feed 5,000 people and was about to give up. But Jesus saw past those limits and saw abundance. In a very real sense, he created abundance. I'm guessing that Christians would say that Jesus saw the unlimited mind of God. He was the unlimited mind of God. And as they say, with God, all things are possible. Given that there is no external physical existence outside of mind, we Buddhists, too, can say all things are possible. I think of this drive toward a moon colony and attempts to reach Mars as opening the mind and opening to the mind. I especially hope that it will open the minds of young people. Kids are taught all sorts of nonsense about peak oil and other resources, climate change because we breathe out too much carbon dioxide, the necessity of eating bugs, and so on. But the tremendous accomplishment of sending 4 human beings on a nearly 700,000-mile journey out and back has to be an inspiration. It was a leap of faith and a complete refutation of the notion of a small, limited life in a zero-sum world. This opening up of mind is what we experience in a 7-day session or meditation retreat. Yes, we sit with others, and there are teachers and other members to help. But ultimately, we take that leap of faith alone. When we enter a zendo, take our seats, and engage the practice, we are taking that shot in the dark. This great leap of faith is addressed in a koan, case number 46 in the Wumen Guan. Master Shi Shuang said, "How do you step forward from the top of a 100-foot pole?" How indeed. This case is often interpreted as a step forward from the realization of absolute emptiness, no thingness of deep concentrated focus, what we call samadhi, to the world of time, space, and karma. But we can look at it another way. The leap out of a settled, comfortable, but unfulfilled life. A woman who has been a housewife for 30 years suddenly decides to go back to college. An art history major switches to engineering, or vice versa. A man quits his job to start his own business. An Air Force pilot volunteers for astronaut training. Or a middle-aged guy joins a Zen group. How will any of this turn out? No idea. There is no knowing. Maybe success, maybe failure. Wumen's verse to this case reads, "He has darkened the eye in his forehead and clung to the mark on the stele. Throw away body and discard life, and the blind one leads the blind." Now, when Shi Shuang says step forward from the top of a 100-foot pole, he is speaking of the unlimited universe. The zero-sum mind would not step forward, but would slide back down the pole to the bottom. Not much inspiration there. And Wumen says, throw away body and discard life. Yes, clinging to the mark on the scale, clinging to our small, limited lives, is actually a kind of death, a no life. Even in our everyday practice, we transcend the zero-sum world. How? By not knowing. It is knowing that traps us in what we take to be a predictable existence of cause and effect and a zero-sum world. Not knowing is liberation. The great visionaries were not trapped by knowing. The Buddha taught the Dharma for the welfare of the many, the benefit of the many, the happiness of the many. Yes. One effect, maybe a goal, of our Zen practice is happiness. So let me ask, will life in a zero-sum world where you know that there's only so much food, so much energy, only so much medical care, so much clean water, does that lead to generosity, well-being, happiness? Or does it lead to fear, miserliness, envy? In our karmic world, we don't get to pick and choose what happens to us. That's the result of actions of body, speech, and mind since time immemorial. But we sure can determine how we react in this moment. And that will change the future. We can deny, disparage, belittle, mock great accomplishments, or we can respect and admire the incredible courage of 4 fragile human beings who sat in a small container atop a gigantic rocket and rode it all the way out of the Earth's gravity field. Okay, we want to be responsible adults. That means planning carefully, taking as many unknowns into account as we can. But as the man said, we don't know what we don't know. So we plan and prepare as best we can, but there's no point in getting attached to a particular outcome. Don't get caught up in knowing. Will we ever build a base on the moon? Almost certainly. Will we send a human being to Mars? I don't know, but I wouldn't bet against it. Why is this so important? Stepping forward from the top of the pole is a part of our humanity. We want to explore, to find new things, places, people. It's in our DNA. From an obscure origin in Central Africa, humans have spread all over the world, from the equator to the poles. And now these moon expeditions are just an extension of that. If we refuse the challenge, if we deny this instinct to explore even vicariously, we deny an important part of our humanity. How big is an idea? How much does thought weigh? Where does understanding reside? How fast can the imagination move? How far can a dream reach? Whether sitting on a mat in the Zendo or sitting in a spaceship going 10 times the speed of sound, we will find out. Together with all beings, we realize the way.